Hello, everyone. Welcome to Spiritual Spotlight series. Today, I'm joined by Philippe Brouillard, and I apologize for mispronouncing your name. He is a best-selling author, speaker, and founder of Vita Quantum. I'm super excited that you're here. I am looking forward to just jumping right in. How you doing today?
I'm amazing.
I love this. So you went from a national mogul ski champion and seven-figure clinic co-founder to complete burnout and spiritual disconnection. What was the moment that you knew that something had to radically change in your life?
So that's an interesting question because if I tell you a little bit my story, like you just mentioned some snippet. So when I was 5, I said to my parents, "Je vais changer le monde." So meaning I want to change the world because my first language is in French. So that's what I told them. And then grew up in the
Nice.
80s. I had friends coming over, like they were saying, like, "What's that? Buddha statues, crystal everywhere." In the 80s, now you have it in the background. I have it in my background, but back then, far from being common. So my
Yep.
parents were deeply spiritual, and at the same time, my dad was a medical doctor, so very rational and very scientific at the same time. And when I was 14, I said, like, I just want to quit school. I'm like, my IQ was in the top percentile, but the director, like, they're like, you need to stay at school. It's very important. But for me, school was meaningless. Nothing made sense. I'll ask, why were you talking about this? Like, just because was the answer. And how does life work? It just does. So I decided if you're not going to teach me the answer, I'll go and find it myself. So the first thing I've looked at was extreme sports, extreme skiing, big jump, real risk, like crazy things. So those moments where I was like midair, like it was complete silence, like for seconds, like everything fully connected, fully alive. But then when I landed, my coach was like, "You're not supposed to do this." So it's like, so maybe it's not the right direction. This is not the right place, even if I ranked 21st in Canada. So there were more towards like what made sense for them. So I just decided that if I'm not gonna fly, I just gonna stop and like start searching in that space.
Hmm.
After that, I like, let's try to find something else. Let's do drugs. Like, so not to escape life, but I was trying to find something like different experience, different emotion to feel something, but none of the good feeling would last. So I was like, maybe that's not the way to build a life, to live
Right.
really. So this is when I really turned inward, like from spirituality, therapy, energy work, retreat, trainings, like, but I was still not finding what I was looking for. And then I turned to work, build this functional mission practice, massive success. I gained recognition, impact, but inside, still this quiet dissatisfaction was still there. So I was like, what's the only place I didn't look? And this is where I turned to science, like quantum science. This is, and I started to consciousness research. I did my PhD, which I'm at the point of finishing. Not to prove anything, but it's really about like stop guessing. Like, how does life work? Like, we most of the time never answer this kind of question. We're like, okay, let's heal this, let's do this. But
Right.
one day while I was teaching, clicked. I watched like people shift, not because I convinced them of anything, but just because the experience of something unusual for themselves. And that's where the moment I knew that this is what I've been searching for my entire life. So it's like I've always been this like research of something. I'm finishing with
Hmm.
a doctorate, like kind of quit school along the way, but I didn't know when I was young what was I was looking. I was looking for something, but a lot of people were like, "I'm searching, feel better, I'm searching," but we most of the time doesn't know what it is.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so it's really one doing the research deeply, specifically in my doctorate, that everything like made a sense in what life is. So
I think that it's amazing that you did have a foundation with a father that is was rooted in science. So then you were able to kind of blend together the science and the spirituality, which is probably something that you're doing now with your new teaching method, which we'll get into. But then it's like you were seeking out this adrenaline, rush inside of you. Did you ever have any resistance in you to your spiritual side of your journey? And what did the skeptic inside of you need to be convinced?
yeah, so it's a very good question because I'm a skeptic and resisting person at a base. So even my dad was a medical doctor. I was kind of against of the medical field, But even if he wasn't functional medicine, I was not open to it. I was putting everything in the same basket. I was young at that point. But then when I started doing the course in functional medicine, I realized, oh, there's really people committed to helping. And so the same thing, like every spiritual tradition are all saying the same thing, but it's like, yeah, but why? There's no why. And this, and those teaching is mostly like through stories, like parable. It's like, but then we need to bring meaning. And when we look at the way they study, for example, Buddhist or the Hermetic Egyptian structure or the Kabbalah, the Jewish Kabbalah, for example, they read the text, they study the text, they trying to find meaning from it. But today we're like, oh, this is what it means. Okay, what's the next thing? So we don't take time to really bring meaning to things. So I was always in different courses doing is like, let's do it. You'll see it works. Okay, yeah, it works, but why? Like why Reiki works, why like kind of family constellation, why work, why crystal is something like feel it. You can
Right.
feel it, but why? Just take one, you'll feel it. Yeah, but why? So I was always looking for this why, but nobody was able to answer this why.
Hmm.
So that's the quest, I think, for meaning. And it's interesting because basically the goal of life is understanding life itself. It's the meaning of life, the purpose of life. So it was kind of interesting along the way that everything I've done was perfect because it brought me this perspective when I did my doctorate to bring meaning from a lot of those different things. So
Absolutely. And I will say that I'm also a registered nurse. So in my
okay.
day job,
Yeah.
I run a doctor's office. So I appreciate those that ask the why. Just because I have pretty crystals, I want to know why they work and how
Yeah,
they
yeah,
work
yeah.
and what do they do to my cellular tissue. So I appreciate that because I feel like there's a layer of understanding that goes in with your clients of no, I have the evidence and the research to back up why I'm saying this is going to work for you.
Yeah.
It's so important. So, which is really cool because you blend together quantum physics, neuroscience, and emotional transformation. For someone hearing that and thinking, that sounds abstract, how do you make the invisible tangible?
So an interesting thing when we talk about like spirituality or those kind of things, we're talking to your right brain, like the feminine aspect, the emotion, the intuitive side. But if we're only that way, sadly, we all went to school, so our right brain is really diminished, and our right left brain is very, very strong.
Right.
So if we don't talk to those both brains, then we have the limbic brain, like the reptilian brain, that is like, oh, no, if you don't agree, I don't let go. He's the one that's protecting us in some ways. Um, so if we can talk to those both sides, then it's like, oh yeah, it makes sense, but oh, now I understand too. And when we bring that gap, it makes a huge difference. But it's like if we talk, for example, about the quantum physics, like we can go to quantum mechanics and talk about numbers and this and that, and like what does it needs, what does it do in life? Nothing much. But the biggest question is how can we use different concepts from quantum physics? For example, the electron can pass through a wall, for example, like which is doesn't make sense in our perspective. But if we throw an electron through a wall, the electron can be on the other side, which is quantum tunneling. So that's why if you open your computer, the processor are not next to each other because then computer would die right away because there is a transfer of energy at some point. So it's like, oh, okay, so you're telling me I could pass through the wall. The probability is there, but the probability is so small that it's kind of not possible, but the probability is still there. So there's a term in quantum physics, a synonym of quantum physics is the physics of possibility. We understand when we go to this quantum world, underneath the atom, so at the electron, photons, protons level, everything become possible.
Hmm.
And it's the observer, so the one who's looking, that's going to manifest something. So the electron in reality is not a particle, even if that's what we've been showing you in school. We were saying it's this little ball, but it's false. It's not a little ball, it's only a field. And then when we look at it like the field where everything is possible, the electron can be everywhere at the same time, which is a superposition concept, can just appear in a specific place where you're looking. So it's funny because at the same time in the quantum physics we're saying like it's the observer creating the reality, and when we look at spiritual tradition they're saying it's how you observe who you are that creates who you are, and so on. So they're saying the same thing now. So we can now, okay, it's working on one side, and then the question is how human beings are made, electron, protons, photons, and so on. So we're made as just quantum particle, but we're saying it does not apply to human being. So that's the scientist perspective, are saying like those things doesn't work. But like why so many people experience something?
I know.
It's so that's the interesting thing is like most scientists would say, nope, doesn't work. But you experience things, but they're like, but if they're saying it doesn't work, but I feel that it works, now I'm kind of confused in some ways. So the more we bring that gap between science and spirituality, the more you'll be able to transform who you are as a human being, as a divine being in reality. But so everything is possible. That's the beauty of it.
So before we talk about your book, I do want to talk about the Vita Quantum. So you're the founder of Vita Quantum, and one
Mhm.
of the things is the source. So what does source actually stand for, and why that acronym?
So why source? I was looking how can we, because basically there's one thing spiritual tradition, specifically like the hermetic perspective, which is the Egyptian structure. They're saying you just need to remember that we're divine, that we're perfect. Jesus was talking about this too. We were here and not talking about religion, but about the spiritual side of him. So if we are in the concept of oneness, which is a concept that most people believe in spirituality, but most people does not understand what it is. Because if we're all one and everything is interconnected, then I'm not broken. There's nothing to broke. There's nothing. So I'm technically God. If I'm not God and I'm praying to God, then it's mean I'm separate. So is the concept of oneness works with I'm separate than God? The answer is no. Oh yeah, yeah, but like I'm trusting life or I'm praying life to help me. I'm like God or source or and and that's the thing. Like source is a use name. A lot of people doesn't want to say God, so source is use. I use most of the time consciousness, saying like everything is consciousness. But they're saying like we're the foundation of everything, and we're perfect as we are, but we just need to remember. And that's the kind of I would say the hard part for most people. It's believing that possibility that everything is possible.
I like
So if,
that.
if we're the source, then this become, how can I say, a foundation of everything.
Hmm.
So that's why I was like trying to find a word that would fit in that sense. And thanks to AI, this is a simplified process. Simply, if not, it's almost a never-ending thing playing with it alone.
Right.
Like, how can we create something? This is where I create the quantum source formula, which is the basic of what I did during my thesis specifically,
Hmm.
and saying, okay, what is the process of what people can experience in life? So that's where
Right.
I like structure a thing of confronting perception, confronting reality, confronting who you are, and what life is. And this makes a huge shift in perspective. Um, so that's kind of a basically of
Yeah.
where everything in there started to connect. Everything is, yeah, in that sense.
So one of the things that you are is like it says when somebody is fragmented, so emotionally, mentally, spiritually, what does coherence look like in the brain and in the nervous system when you're bringing those aspects of that client back together?
So so when we're fragmented, which is most of the time we act this way. So the brain is the same thing. So we're like there's like the frontal lobe, the parietal
Hmm.
lobe, the occipital lobe. So the different part of the. I try to keep it simple. Like the main part of the brain, the cortex, whereas like there are four main aspects. And in neuroscience, they're like, okay, one's triggered, the other one can be following. So it's like a step-by-step process. But
Hmm.
now we know that when somebody is really connected, for example, if we're talking about like a mystical experience or one experience, different part of the brain that are not fully connected are automatically triggers, which is a nonsense in the neuroscience perspective in regular neuroscience, because everything take time and space, even if like a fraction of a second,
Hmm.
but it still take time. And we see different things that happen at this exact same reality. So the moment you can experience like the reality of you're not separate, then things become instantaneous. There's a study that was done in 1982 with Jacobo Greenberg Zibelbaum in Mexico. And what they did, they took two groups of people. The first group was the testing group, and the other group was the doing nothing group. I'm just using simple term here. So the group that did something together, they meditate for 20 minutes. So they were paired together, two-person. They meditate 20 minutes, and the other group just did nothing, just waited in the waiting room, for example. So then we send those groups in different chambers. So person A and B from the same group are sent to different chambers, which are Faraday chambers, meaning that there's no signals, nothing can pass through those walls. And then we did the same thing to the other group. So what we do, we send light flashes and sound flashes to the person A, and then what we know is neuroscience. We know the brain reacts to those kind of things. So there's like different
Right.
brain waves going all over the place. And then the person B is not seeing anything, but his brain reacts at the exact same time, the exact same way, but he's not seeing anything.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Then you're like, oh, this is really contradicting what we would expect. The group B, the other group where they didn't do anything, what we expect person B, brain doesn't change anything. There's no change. So now you're like, okay, quantum physics only works for particles, but you're like, oh, if we're in sync with others, then we can really experience oneness. So the real term we would say in quantum physics, we wouldn't say you're one. You're one in possibility. Meaning you have the possibility to be one, but most of the time we're so used to get into our daily lives, like being affected by things external, then we're not one in everyday life.
Right.
But we all have the possibility to do it, but we prefer staying in our comfort zone and being in security, even if we're suffering there. But the neuroscience, not the neuroscience, I forgot the word for some reason. The when the stress, the body reacts to stress, is the neural, no, the forgetting
The
the name,
nervous
but
system.
the nervous system. Thank you. I'm sure the nurse get it. The nervous system prefer the known, even if it's suffering. So there's
Right.
a study. What they did, they give you a two choice. The first choice is 50% chance of getting electroshock, and the other one is 100% chance of getting the electroshock. So if I'm asking you, Rachel, what's the choice? What are you choosing? 50% or 100% pain?
I don't know. Depends on how much of a shock I'm receiving, because then I can prepare myself.
But it's
Uh,
interesting because you can prepare yourself. But then if it's 50%, you cannot prepare. You
I
don't know
can't
what's going to
prepare
happen.
myself. That's what
Yeah.
I'm like. I'm leaning more towards 100. I'll be honest,
Yeah.
but I'm like, how much is it? I don't want
Yeah.
to be like,
So that's the thing. So the body craved 100%
wow.
because it's known, it's predictable. But our mental aspect is like, no, it's going to take the 50%. So we prefer in reality, like staying in the comfort zone, even if it's known in suffering, versus
Yes.
going to something we don't know, like changing job, saying no once we're used to say yes. Transforming ourselves is okay. Tomorrow I'll be somebody new because I'm working on myself. That might not be a good news because you don't know now what's going to happen around you.
Yeah.
So for me, like one of the that's not a scientific proof, but I'm like, okay. So in a lot of couples today, there's a man that does nothing and a woman try to evolve.
Hmm.
So if the woman evolve, the reality of the husband is not evolving, so he's changing because his reality is changing. So if he doesn't want to do that, then he's quitting.
Right.
So, like, this is unstable. I don't know. It's uncertainty, which is a fundamental concept of quantum physics. It says, like, everything is uncertain. And
Right.
there's only one thing certain in life, that you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. But our
Well,
brain
you're
is always trying to predict the future. So we're like
yes.
in this equilibrium between those two things.
Well,
So,
we are conditioned to want to live in a world, even though it's we don't like to be uncomfortable. If that's what we're used to. So, and to break out of that, to get to the other side, a lot of people have resistance with it. And I think some of the uncomfortable aspects of, I know some of the things that you work on is trauma. So, can trauma really be transformed through quantum based rewiring, or are we just coping more effectively?
it just okay.
He's busy,
my,
everyone.
my daughter just came in and laughed. Ah!
She's like, let's talk about trauma. All right. I want to talk about trauma.
It was kind of funny.
I'll show you
Usually I lock
trauma.
my door, but I forgot locking my door, and she just came in and she was like, "What are you doing? I want to see."
I love that. That's so cute.
Yeah. So she's not used to seeing any screens, TVs, or anything like this. So when she's like, "Oh,"
She's like, ooh, this is
yeah,
magic.
yeah, this is addictive. It's like it's moving. It's like colors and. But so if we talk about trauma, so if we're talking about trauma, that's mean because you think it's negative. We're putting a judgment based on an
Oh,
experience.
that's a good point. Yes.
So we're fragmented in that space. You're like, okay, what happened is broken myself. But if we're believing oneness, there's nothing positive, there's nothing negative.
Yeah.
Okay? So, and even then, if we're bringing another thing, is we know in neuroscience, 90% of what happened in the past, what we remember is completely false.
Mm,
So it's just an interpretation, a meaning, a perception of what really happened. So
yeah.
10% is quite a small number, but we believe that those things are true. So in spirituality, they're never talking about things are negative. They're like, it's about evolution. Even if the Buddhists are saying, for example, life is suffering, and it's through suffering that we see things, and it's about detachment to things that we want to grow. So if you're defining yourself about what happened, and then you become attached to it, then it becomes who you are. And then you're wondering why you're suffering because you're putting meaning through it. So the moment you say that everything is about oneness, it's about evolution, then every experience is just a moment of an experience to evolve.
Mm,
So there's nothing bad or nothing negative. There's nothing like this. It's just moment for experience for growth. Life very shift very strongly in that sense. Just a proof on that, like when we understand life more deeply, we get out of suffering. That's the number one suffering, and from the Buddhist perspective, is not understanding reality, not understanding life. The Hinduists are talking about Maya, which is the illusion of what we think reality is. So the more you understand life, the more you understand like everything is about evolution, everything is that's the purpose of life, then those events become moment of growth. So in my thesis, I was asking, so in my thesis was a 3 months program that I developed, and I was confronting reality using quantum physics and spirituality and different things around that. And I've got 54% of participants that did not experience any very stressful events like divorce,
wow.
somebody getting loss of job, getting fired, somebody close that you're really connected, like dying, or like heart diseases, they are getting chronic diseases. So 54% of participants didn't experience any of those. They experienced a 30% improvement in overall happiness. The interesting aspect is 46% of participants experienced those very stressful events, but they're talking about 80% improvement in happiness. Yeah. Then it's like, oh, what's the problem with science here? Big stress
Right.
should cause pain, should cause suffering. But
But
then
should
when
it?
um,
But should it? It shouldn't, right?
it should technically, but in that case, it did not, because you started to see things differently. You went from that space of like, oh, I need to be fixed. This is a problem. This is negative. This is. But if everything is about evolution, then why are we judging those events? I've got to my friend that wrote a book in Quebec, Canada, so in Montreal space in French, and the title is The Gift of Cancer. Her cancer was a blessing because she saw it very differently. And her whole life changed, everything changed. So we would say a cancer is negative. Why? Then we would say, oh, yeah, this is negative. But no, no, okay, this is. Now we're trying to let's negotiate what's negative or what's positive or what's make me grow because then I don't feel too much uncomfortable. And then I can say it's the Rachel fault. It's your fault. It's not mine. But at the moment I'm saying it's your fault, then I'm at the effect of things and I have no power. So free will works sometimes, not all the times.
Right.
So that's it because even Einstein said like God doesn't play dice, meaning there's no chance. So if you get in
Yeah,
the trauma or a cancer or getting fired, is it by chance? Is it something that you need to learn and grow from it? If it's the case, that means you're the one creating it because we're going back to the observer effect. You're creating your reality. And they're not saying it works sometimes. It's like gravity. If I drop something, it's going to always drop. But no, no, but sometimes, yeah. So that's the thing. Like we're removing your power. And sometimes I just don't want to take it because it's too suffering. Like I'm the one creating my cancer. If the answer is yes, then you have the power to change it. If the
right.
answer is no, is like you might be able to get out the statistics, but there's tons of study that shows you instant remission from cancer, from like almost name every kind of diseases.
Right.
There's tons of study that shows this. So why not everything is possible? We're going back to that same route. At the moment you're at the effect, at the moment you're saying this is negative, this is not my fault, this is where's the power of transformation?
It's true. So true. I've actually interviewed quite a few people that have had cancer and they have said that it's a gift. It's like transformed their lives. It helped them to go within to really, shift away from a different negative victim mindset into a positive, empowered, and it's fascinating to me. I have a very close family member right now who has stage 4 cancer, and her mindset and just she's like, well, I got this. Like it's, it's like taking that power and realizing that you're one with all, and that maybe and I have a hard time occasionally, sometimes I do and sometimes I don't, because I do believe the body keeps the score. So everything that happens, it gets impacted into our cellular tissue. So then it's like, how did we create this? But I think that's a conversation for another time. Because I'll go off on a rabbit hole we're not prepared to go down.
Basically, if we keep it short,
Sure.
it's your unconscious that keeps the information because you need to learn from it.
So
And at the
true.
moment you learn from it, you just detach from it.
So true. And I want to take it from a different perspective, what you
Uh-huh.
just said. I
Yeah.
recently myself was going through something, and I'm trying to be vague just because we don't need to get into the weeds. But basically, I hired a company, spent a lot of money, realized it wasn't a good fit. We'll just put it
Mhm.
at that. We
Yeah.
had a
Yeah.
contract, whatnot. And normally I'd be like, oh, well, I'll just suck it up and let it go. It's only a short term contract, this and that. For the first time, but I took a step back because I'm one. And I said, there's a lesson in this for me to learn. I need to stand up for myself and I need to be empowered regardless of the outcome. And that's something that I can do for my patients. I can, it's hard to do that for yourself. But I'm turning it on myself that I didn't go and I was, oh, woe is me for a second. But I shifted. I was like, okay, this is part of a larger cosmic awareness for Rachel that there's a lesson in this. So let me take out the emotion. What's the lesson I need to learn? And let's apply it. So, and thankfully I had a very good outcome and I got a full run refund. So it's like, but I was grateful for the fact that in that moment and due to I feel like my spiritual background, I was like, wait, there's a lesson here. Like, let's stop and move forward. And it was interesting. It was an interesting experience for me because normally I'd be like, it's fine. It's okay. No, it's not. It was
Yeah.
not.
That's correct. And until you don't get through this, you're gonna live the same thing, and you're like, "Oh, why is
Yes.
always happening to me?" And like, why? You
Why?
were just not
But
learning from.
it goes to what you talk about shadow work, because you do talk about shadow work. And why does real growth demand shadow work? And what happens if we avoid it?
So if we avoid it, it's the problem when I talk about shadow work is because people doesn't understand life. So we always need to look back in some reality. So it's a
Right.
bit like shadow work in some ways. It's therapy. It's good.
I like how you put that. It's therapy. I like that.
That's what it
Okay.
is. We're trying to because the thing is, every time you put your attention on something, you're putting your energy on something. So you're making that something grow. So that's why I'm not a big fan of psychologists because they're like, oh, let's talk about the problem. I'm like, we're going to just amplify the problem. But that's reality. That's not every psychologist, but that's my experience. And a lot of my clients says the same thing. So,
Right.
so if we want to do therapy, we're going to do work on this, work on that. And like, we're trying to fix something. And shadow work is good, which is kind of therapy in some ways. It's trying to find what's not working. But at the
Hmm.
same time, if you really focus on your growth, transmuting your identity was transforming, like shifting completely your identity, everything that was attached to your previous identity does not vibrate anymore with the new one.
Oh, I like that.
So that's why I'm like, I'm not a big fan of therapy and those kind of things because we're like, okay, let's fix your trauma, let's fix this. It's a never ending story. Stop
Mm.
being attached to things. Oh, okay. So if I'm not attached to anything, then I'm God, which is not easy. But it's like, where am I being attached? You were attached to the relationship with the company and what it was not working at the moment. You're like, okay, I can just detach of what's going to be the results and just have a conversation and whatever the person says, and then you get a refund. But most of the times when we plan something, we're like, okay, I want this to happen. I want this thing to happen. There's no possibility. There's attachment.
Mm.
There's no space. So the particle is already manifest. Nothing to do. At the moment you detach, the moment you stop like observing the exact result, everything become possible. So that's why when you focus something bigger than yourself, like the things from the bottom just does not attach anymore.
Hmm.
Uh, so working shadow is good, but you're being conscious of like what's not working, what's your fragmented. It's still a dualistic, but it's still a good thing. So when people start my program, I'm like, okay, if you want, this could help along the way to set specific intentions during the program. You can look at your timeline of what happened in your life with technically looking what your shadows are, but you don't need to do it. You can just focus on things greater than yourself.
Hmm.
And it's like most athletes focus being the best, not focusing on like, okay, those are the problems behind me. So I just want to improve this. No, I just want to
Right.
be, I just want to improve what I'm doing. Um, so that's, I bring the perspective to oneness, evolution,
Hmm.
tension versus, oh, I've got problem is the duality perspective, and in my opinion, in
Right.
that sense.
I like that. So I do want to talk about your book, your
Yeah,
best-selling book.
yeah.
So for in the English, the title "Life Rethought" is powerful.
Rethinking happiness.
Rethinking happiness,
Yeah, you got the translation and not the
guys.
real.
Even better, rethinking happiness is better than life
Because in
rethought.
French is rethinking life, but when I was working with the person with the English, they're like, life is too far fetched. It's like too far.
So
People
I
looking
did
for happiness.
rethinking happiness because I that must be what, because to be honest with you, I was trying to get it off of Amazon and
Yeah.
I can only find the French version. So I'm gonna write that down. Okay, so excuse me.
No.
So no, no, throw that one question out. Uh, what is the core thesis of the book? And I guess let's talk about rethinking happiness. So, what does that mean to you, and what do you hope that people gain out of reading your book?
So there's, I don't know, hundreds of books maybe talking about happiness. It's most likely like the 21 strategy or the 7 tools or like, but these are things you still need to do.
Hmm.
Einstein said, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result is insanity. So we're trying to use different tools, we're trying to do different things and expecting a different result, but we're not changing who's using the tools.
Mm.
So it's the being perspective. So the moment you change who you are, then those tools can be used. We can talk about mindfulness, Reiki, or whatever it is, shadow work. But basically, if you emerge as a somebody different, all of what you're doing in life will be different.
Hmm.
Because the observer, which is the basic of quantum physics, is different. So we need to understand what happiness first is. And when we look, so my thesis is specifically on happiness, which is an expansion of consciousness, the way I define it, how my teacher was defining it. And but when we look at dictionaries definition, they're confusing happiness and pleasure, which
Mm.
is are two very different things. And this is where most people get stuck without knowing it. So pleasure is very intense, lasts a very short amount of time, which is very related to hormones like dopamine, for example.
Right.
Happiness is very something internal. It's not something external like pleasure would do. So it's funny because most all traditional spirituality, all saying like the goal of life is happiness, or they're saying it's enlightenment, saying that happiness is an expansion of consciousness. So the more you raise your consciousness, the more you're going towards enlightenment, and
Hmm.
technically, the more you become happy. So we need to define first what happiness is, and that's kind of the first part of the book. But then we need to understand what life is, because if we're pursuing what we've been sold what life is, which is go to school, get a good diploma, like become a nurse, and then good money, and then you're helping people, and then you get a nice house, a nice car, you get kids, and this is life. But if we look at the data today, we have more information than ever. We have more comfort than ever. We have more accessibility to anything, but we're sicker and more we're sicker and happier than ever.
Right.
So you're like,
Very true.
what life is? We don't talk about this. We have big names in philosophy, like Plato was like, who's the high and I am? Who cares? Just do money. Just make money. You'll buy happiness. So we're living in that space where we confuse the two, like Coca-Cola did an advertisement like 7 years, 10 years ago. They're saying drink Coke and be happy. That's fun. Because we know drinking Coke create disease create unhappiness. So how can you say it's great happiness?
Right. Were they sued?
So we're always bringing those concepts, and then like you're like, okay, what's happiness? I'm trying to pursue. And some studies, it's funny because they're going to say the only thing we can guarantee with happiness is the pursuit of it, because you'll never attain it, which is really
Right.
pleasure. Every time you live something pleasureful, it's intense, it feels good, but then you want more. And then you become
Wants
kind
more.
of addicted to those pleasureful events. And then you're pursuing something that you think you'll get one day, which is the hedonic treadmill in psychology, where like every time you get the next plateau, the next promotion, your next thing, a new car or whatever, you feel good for a certain amount of time. And then
Right.
emotionally, you go back to the same level you were before. So then you
Yeah.
want more, you want the next thing. So if we understand that the reality is about the physical things, it's about matter, it's about getting stuff, and then we think we're going to be happy by doing different tools or strategy or the 7 tips to be happier, never going to work. So that's why a lot of people read a lot of books, do a lot of therapy, do a lot of retreats. They're feeling good in the moment, but it doesn't last, because it's more about tips or tricks, but those things doesn't
Right.
transform. So if
Right.
you go and study Buddhism, like real Buddhists in Nepal, for example, because now we don't go to Tibet more, or you go to India and study like really Hinduist and you become a monk, there's no tips and tricks.
You
It's
have to do
about
the work.
evolving. Yeah, let's do the work. Let's work on yourself. Let's evolve. Let's understand life more and so on. But now we're like, oh no, okay, it's going to read a book. I'm going to feel good because I'm checking off from my to-do list. And then it's like, it's more about doing stuff to feel good than being differently to feel good.
Right.
So that's the challenge. And we bring the first part of the book is really understanding what life is about. Then the second one is really bringing those concepts in different perspective of life, like
Mm.
education, leadership, business, and so on. And then we give different tips and tricks because everybody wants them, but like we're just giving them. And at the end, we bring it back to that perspective of like, how should we live in different ways in that perspective. So there's one chapter called, for example, are we meant to, with age, how can I say this? Let's see how I written the title. I'm trying to keep it short. Programmed to be old and unhappy.
That's interesting.
So we know that,
Does it
like,
tell
okay,
you
the
how to
age,
not be old and unhappy? Like, it does it tell
but
you to
no,
be
but if
happy when
I'm,
you're old?
so I was in a functional medicine conference many years ago, and there's the doctor in front and says, like, who wanted to live longer? No one raising their hands. I'm like, who wants to live longer and healthy? Now everybody's raising hands
Right.
because we associate aging and unhappiness.
Mm.
That's because now you believe that's true. So if what's you believe, you're creating your reality. So you're going to say, okay, with time, I'm going to age and so on. So why can we reverse aging with different modalities by changing who you are? Like, for example, my program, we didn't talk about nutrition or health things. We're talking about life. 33% diminution in stress, 34% diminution in overall symptoms, 40% improvement in neurotransmitter. We didn't do anything to manage this based on technical studies for research. But when we change, we see reality differently. So there's a lot of concept in our belief that like we just take those, that's how it is. And then we never question this because we think it this way, because society thinks it's this way. And then you say to your friends, you're like, oh, as I'm getting older, I'm gonna be healthier. They're gonna say, you're crazy. And then you say, yeah, I don't think I should think this way. Doesn't make sense. Why? If we're saying everything is possible, why is this not possible? Yeah, but this is,
That's
so
interesting.
that's the thing. Like now you're in your brain, you're like, I don't know. I never thought of this. So we never take the time to sit down and question things in life. So if you read the book, you'll see there's in every chapter there's a lot of questions. So we bring a
Hmm.
concept, a new concept for most people in the society, and then we put a question to make them, oh yeah, I didn't think of it. Because most of the time you read the book, you say, oh, the book is so good. This part was like, okay, the sixth level of happiness is very, very interesting. And then we put a question, then you're like, oh, it makes you stop and wonder.
And pause.
Most books are not the way it is. We're just giving
Right.
more information. But we have all the
Right.
information in the world, but we're sicker and unhappier than ever. So there's something we didn't understand. So, for example, when you buy the book, you can download. It's a free PDF. It's a companion guide. Every chapter, there's like 5 questions approximately that we're adding for making you reflect.
Oh, that's awesome. Now it
And like,
looks like you. Oh, go ahead.
go ahead.
No,
And a
no,
lot of
you're
people are
good.
like, what's your number one trick for the book? Do a book club. It's free. Just buy the books and discuss
Absolutely.
books. Because then you're like, oh, okay, I didn't see this. I didn't think of that. Oh, you're seeing this way. Yeah. You're reflecting to things. What happened in school? The teacher asks a question, and then like if you don't have the good question, they're saying this is the answer and that's it. And when you say something different, it's like, no, you should not ask this question. So question is the like one of the most important aspect and one of the only we're the only species on earth that has this possibility of reflecting. They're like, no, don't reflect too much. Why? Why? Ask why. And kids ask why all the time because they want to learn.
Absolutely.
They want to understand things. And when we become adult, well,
So it looks like you launched in January 2026 the happiness mission. Is that something that is currently going on now that people can become a part of?
the answer is yes and no.
Okay,
So
then.
the quantum happiness mission is functioning is in French as of now.
Okay.
I'm gonna launch the one in English technically around March. Now I should
Okay.
launch this month the Quantum Happiness 101, which is kind of an introduction
Okay.
to the Quantum Happiness mission because the mission is like a 6 months. It's quite an interesting concept of confronting reality, confronting studies, confronting different things, which is the mission. And you become part of a mission. You set your own mission, and we're about completing mission that like the moon mission, that the thing that didn't make sense, that everybody was saying like he's crazy saying we're going to the moon for JF Kennedy when he said this from the podium. But like, how can you live your life the same way?
Mm,
So that's kind of the mission that should start around March, technically in English, if everything went well. But now but in French. And this program, the mission is what was studied during my thesis. So the number I was giving earlier, this is
right.
the kind of result we get from that. I've got other results, other things that came in the thesis. But it's really about, okay, how can I confront who I am? So it's not necessarily I'm bringing new stuff. Yeah, a lot of stuff is new for a lot of people, and but some it's not necessarily new, but it's the way we bring the concept and how we make you reflect on it. That's really, I think, a big change on how we usually learn and study things. Because at the time we don't study things; we're just consuming things. That's how
That's
we,
fascinating.
and so we went from fast food and we're like, oh, it became a huge trend. And at some point we're like, oh, maybe fast food is not too good for you. And now we
Let's go to
want to
Whole
do the
Foods.
same. Yes. And then we want to do the same thing in spirituality. We're looking for the fast
Absolutely.
and the easy step. And that's one thing I call like the psychedelics, which is the fast food of spirituality in my perspective. There was a
That's
big.
int. That just that just that's an interesting perspective. Okay,
So I'm like,
interesting.
I live in Mexico, and so many people does those things around me, and but I'm like, if you want to do
Hmm.
it, it's fine. But at some point, you'll need to do the work.
Right. It's almost
Yeah.
like we're spiritual bypassing
Mhm. Yeah.
doing the work. And
Yeah.
it's like, okay, I'm going to have this hallucination and this amazing experience. And some people do have profound
Yep. Yep.
moments, but it's kind of like what you were saying before. You're chasing this high. You're going to have that momentarily by doing this medicinal experience. But then what's next? You're chasing something else. You're going to go do something else. You're going to go get ketamine. What are you going to do? What are you
Yeah.
going to do? Because
Yeah.
you didn't do the
Exactly.
work.
Sure. So there's Dr. Gabor Mate. You might know this name. He's specialized in those kind of drugs, for example, but he works mostly with people in psychiatric. He's a
Mm,
doctor in Vancouver, in Canada, where's the most people addicted to different drugs and stuff like this. So he work a lot with people in addiction specifically. And so people that work with him, we would put them like on the level of happiness at level zero. They have no
mm.
capacity. They have no possibility of really shift. They're like so stuck in their reality and they're thinking that's the reality. So for them, perfect. We have something to help them and trigger them and like shake them out of where they are. At level one of happiness, like people experience sometimes happiness, but it's mostly pleasure. So people over there like needs like psychiatrics or psychologists. There's like deep things. So with those people, it work well too. At level two, where most everybody is, you have the capacity to do the work.
Mhm.
But we're in a moment in a moment in time where we want things to be fast, to things to be easy. And psychedelics for those people, that's the easy way and the fast way.
Right.
But in my perspective, everybody that I met that are super evolved never work with those things. I never met somebody that was super evolved and consuming those things. And I know people that teach this to professional to become how do you call the people that does that? It's like they're gonna facilitators with
Right.
psychedelics and stuff like this. I know a lot of different people. So I know I've lived in different communities in Costa Rica, and some people were like they facilitate those things in retreats in Costa Rica for years. Some
Yep.
people that have done a lot, and that's my experience. Doesn't mean that it's a science proven back thing, but it's still. And every people that I work as very evolved spiritual person, they're like, never touch this. So I was like,
Fascinating.
so I'm not against it, but it's how you use it. Like therapy, it's
Right.
the same thing. I put it the same perspective. Like it's a different way of therapy, but you're not doing your evolution your own self, which is not bad in certain state, in certain level. But are
And
you
then,
developing your?
maybe a different
Like,
example would be, somebody that's going on a spiritual path, they might turn to mediums and psychics, to get a quick answer. You get that quick high of, I had this great reading, but then I still need to go within and do the work.
correct.
So
Yeah,
that's interesting.
yeah. So I'm not saying don't see those people. Sometimes it's you need clarity on something. It might go okay, but you still need to do the work. It's
Absolutely.
like nobody became the best in the world in something, and like somebody doing for somebody else. Like you won't become
Yeah,
the
you can't.
best quarterback in football or whatever it is by having somebody throwing the ball for you. Like it doesn't make sense. But
Can I just watch
it's
it
a
on
bit,
TV and be the best quarterback? Come on.
yeah. Or you can study it, but you never play it, and you're like, I know everything about it, but you never thrown a ball. Like it's kind of funny. But we think this way, but we know it doesn't make sense. But because we don't
Right.
resonate on this, we don't question things.
Right.
So yeah,
So for our final question,
yeah.
if you could dismantle one piece of spiritual fluff that's holding people back right now. I know we kind of talked about the substances, maybe something else. What would that be?
Because when we talk about spirituality, usually I agree with most everything. I don't recall something not agreeing because they all say the same thing, and quantum physics, we say the same thing. But I would say it's more like the movement of new age movement, and it's the lack of deepness in things. Like it's the okay, yes, I believe in oneness. Okay, and then what? What does it mean? I don't know. So I think that the biggest issue now, and in the spiritual world, yeah, in that realm of the spirituality of today, without one thing specifically, is the consuming of stuff and without really going in deepness in things. Um, so we pass from a materialistic perspective to spiritual seekers, but we're still doing the same thing with like positive things. Like we're gonna buy crystals, we're gonna buy retreats, we're gonna crave this new book or this new course or this meditation or now breath work is the new thing. And but we don't much like go in deepness of things. Like if we talk about breathworks, I know so many different people that do certification in breathworks, and like breathwork is a tool.
Right.
It's not the thing that is going to change who you are. It's a
No.
tool. So who were doing breathwork before? People were not just doing breathworks. For doing Buddhist or Hinduist, they were doing a lot of different breathworks, especially Hinduist. It was part of the whole thing. But now we separate everything. We become an expert in one thing, but we're not an expert of life.
Hmm.
And spirituality talks about life, but we don't talk about life anymore. So I think that's the missing thing is what is life? And that's the thing I never found. And in my story, I was looking for what life is, but I didn't know what that was the question. For example, when I was, I don't know, 18, we had philosophy courses, and I was like, that's so boring. And then this was like pre-university, and then I quit because I was doing more skiing than anything else. Then 10 years after that I came back, and I was like the other student, which were like 17, 18. I was like 27. They were like, who's this guy? Like he's passionate about philosophy and he's like talking about all those weird things. And I was like, we're talking about life. But when you're a kid, you're like, who cares about this?
Right.
We don't understand why, and we're just doing those things. So that's why like alternative school like Montessori or Waldorf or Alpha School or Forest schools, most of the time children are learning through the experience of things. Like
Right.
$2, $4 give you $4. I don't. Two plus two equal four. I don't know if I did two plus four equal
Yes.
four. I'm not sure what I was doing. I think I did. But like we're learning in a practical way, so we're
Right.
learning the why at the same time. So a lot of problem at school is not understanding why you're like just doing this because, and that's why I felt school was meaningless. And that's why I think, in some ways, like the new age movement of today's spirituality is very shallow. And that's why I think it's kind of there's the lack of meaning through all of this. So we're looking for the therapy, for the techniques instead of like studying life itself, which all traditional spirituality were doing before. And we lost this aspect. So
It
that's
goes
my,
to, I really like that. It goes to, don't be enamored by the shiny things. You
yeah,
know,
in some ways it is.
it's good to go back to basics and go within to find some of the answers that you're looking for. And yeah,
Yeah.
that's fascinating. I want to thank you so much for coming to the Spiritual Spotlight series. I am going to make sure to link your website and your book and everything when I upload the episode. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you.